Can I give you another example of when I didn't have that guidance? I mean, this was
Yeah.
ages ago. I went to Alice Springs with a group of people, and we were going around. It was really exciting, and going to this community. I mean, and we went to Charles Creek, which is sort of like part of the Todd River or something like that, but a little,
Yeah.
and there was what they call a Charles Creek community, and at that time I did not know, and I wasn't aware that you don't stand up when everybody else is sitting down. But I just didn't want to sit on the ground, and then
Yeah.
the people that I had gone with, like some of the uh, just people, they were
Yeah.
looking at me and making, like, sit down.
Welcome to the Strong Legacy podcast, where real stories shape real strength. Today's guest is Delphine Geia, a highly respected First Nations leader and professional dedicated to strengthening community, culture, and connection. Delphine brings a wealth of lived experience, cultural knowledge, and leadership with a strong focus on healing, understanding, and empowering people through truth and shared experiences. In this episode, she shares powerful insight around culture, resilience, community, grief, and the importance of connection and understanding in today's world. Before we begin, a brief disclaimer. This podcast is for general information and inspiration only and is not professional, cultural, medical, or legal advice. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners are advised that this episode may contain discussion relating to sorry business, death, deceased person, grief, and cultural experiences that may cause sadness or distress. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you for being here. This is Strong Legacy Podcast, where strength is lived, learned, and passed on. Let's begin. Good afternoon, Delphine. How you doing? Welcome to Strong Legacy Podcast.
Thank you, Amit, and I really appreciated being invited to take part today.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot to dive in, so I'll start with my first question. Um, can you share a little about your background and what has shaped your connection to culture and community?
Okay, my background, I'm born on Palm Island. Palm Island is a place, as we are generally known, to be a penal colony, and lots of people were sent there as stolen generation. My mum was sent there from up at Cooktown, and my great grandparents were sent there from down Proserpine Way. So in terms of language today, I'm more or less fifth generation or fourth generation stolen generation. That's how they name it. Um, and in that time, because my we had no language, it was taken out. We were taken away from those places, or at least my parents were, and so we could just pick up whatever language was around, and therefore the culture and community that I belonged to was mostly what was forged in those areas. Forged as in, okay, well, we don't have a language that we can speak now, so we will just make do with what's here, and some people did remember some words or some parts of conversations, like my mum did, because she was taken away about. She says, "Oh," when she points like that, like at a kid, she says, "Oh, I was about that size," and anybody
Yeah.
from 8 to 12, and she spoke all her language when she was stolen, and then by the time she became an adult, she couldn't remember any of that. So it was, like a bit of a reverse there. But other than that, that's my background, and it 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 was okay. It was okay because we had our parents and grandparents to guide us in,
Yeah.
they were navigating the society, they were navigating whatever was around, and so we felt secure. I felt secure in that. So that's my connection to culture and community, more so what our own family culture was growing up.
Oh, thank you, Delphine, for sharing that. We'll dive into the cultural protocols. What are cultural protocols and why are they so important when working in First Nation communities?
All right, the protocols to me sounds like the best practice, and so that the best practice may not be written down in law as we know it, LAW, um, but it would be something like, for example, oh, we don't let anybody or kids go over that way because of X, Y, or Z. And it's not that there is a law about that. It's that there is a good reason why that shouldn't happen. And so you got that immediate safety protocols around that's around immediate safety. Then you have protocols around grey areas that are not necessarily written down. And one of the areas that I think I can say here is, all right, for example, the way that someone is dresses to go in and do a particular job, or when they're invited in to do a particular participation. And so if I was invited or somebody was invited to go to, let's just say, a women's group meeting, informal, but they were still invited.
Yeah.
You would go with that in mind and respectfully, approach that, I guess, based on respect that you're invited in the first place, and respecting that you were there to see what they needed from you or how you could help, but you're not in charge. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's a best practice or a protocol in that way. And so when I went to Arakun, the first thing that happened was I had a meeting in a closed room with the elders, and they told me straight out what the position was in relation to them that I would have. Harriet said to me, "You call me Sissy. I will call you Sissy because we are nearly the same age. You call me Uncle." So straight away that protocol was there. It wasn't written down, I mean, as a person coming, as an Australian citizen, generally know that people don't tell you what to do. But that is a situation where it was a right fit. I was there to do something. I didn't know the place. That wasn't not my place. I needed to be guided by people. So that was the best practice there, right from the start. And they set that. So to answer that question, what are cultural protocols? That's a cultural protocol, and it was from one Aboriginal person from another community, you know, entering
Yeah.
in their community. And so it's a preferred method. It's a preferred method when you're looking at First Nations communities. They may not say that to you. They may not say, well, our preference is, but you pick it up. If you have that kind of um, training about you because you grew up with that that sense of respect and that sense of, okay, this is new ground here. What's my position? I don't know it all. I need to be guided, or I need to be in, invited in certain spaces and things like that. So I find um, that a lot of that is related to or is common to people or cultures that have extended families, you
Yeah.
know, because if, and for example, Italian family, Italian families, they got grandma, grandfather, all uncles, and everybody is important and
Yeah.
valued. And so that, but there is also a hierarchy. And so that's the best practice for that particular group. The same as Fijian people, Fijian nationals I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have mixed with a lot of them when they come over to Australia for certain things. Um,
Yeah.
and and even in my own Torres Strait Island communities, it goes without saying that that's okay. That's man business there. No woman go there.
Yeah.
And women. So it's not written down, but and if you don't know, you should, because
Yeah.
sooner or later someone will tell you. So I'm not sure if that's answers your question there. Um, More or less, the cultural protocols you won't know unless you feel it out.
Yeah. Or sometimes you get approached um, by the elders. And that's why it's so important to have the cultural induction in the communities.
Yes.
So you get to learn all that aspect of things. So you're aware of those things. I think that's yeah. I think that's very important one.
Can I give you another example of when I didn't have that guidance? I mean, this was
Yeah.
ages ago. I went to Alice Springs with a group of people, and we were going around. It was really exciting, and going to this community. I mean, and we went to Charles Creek, which is sort of like part of the Todd River or something like that, but a little,
Yeah.
and there was what they call a Charles Creek community. And at that time, I did not know, and I wasn't aware that you don't stand up when everybody else is sitting down. But I just didn't want to sit on the ground, and then
Yeah.
the people that I had gone with, like some of the uh, just people, they were
Yeah.
looking at me and making, like sit down. And
Gestures.
yeah, so I eventually did, and but I found out later than when they said, here, if you stand up and the others are sitting down, they take it as an insult because you think you're higher than them.
Yeah.
I learned quickly then, but I was appreciated that that people
Yeah.
told me that from that time.
Ah, yes. It's such an important thing, those protocols, because that sort of then dictates how people will approach you. If you, it just shows that you're not respecting the culture, and those things. You get it right, it makes a big difference, as you're aware in our work in Arakun and other places. It's the same thing. So yeah, the protocols, it's really good. How can professionals ensure they approach communities with respect and cultural awareness?
Um, I would suggest if there is a structure there already, as in an administration structure of sorts, you know, if you're going in from this place to that place and you're doing it with, the Australian way of doing things, as in flying in and the best thing to do is let someone know you're coming. And that way, and I mean, uh, local government has procedures. You just ring up and say, "Can I come?" Or you send an email, or you make sure that you've got someone who knows about you at the other end, um, and also your purpose for going. That's what I would say is the most important thing, um, because if you could rock up by yourself, which is also doable in Australia. You could pay a ticket and end up there, and then you're wandering around, and that's not necessarily a safe thing to do, or not necessarily I won't say right, but it's inconvenient, and it can be inconvenient for yourself, particularly, and then others around if there's no information about what's going on and how to interact with people either
Yeah.
way. So yeah, certainly let people know. And recently, I did have a question. Like somebody rang me, and it wasn't a mobile that I recognised. This is a couple of months ago, and they said, "Oh, we heard that you used to work in Arakun, and that and that you'd know who to put us in contact with. And I said, who are you? But they told me. And anyway, I was a young person. And I said, okay, so where are you now? And they said, oh, we're in Arakan.
Oh.
I said, all right. I said, look, go straight to the council office, ask for Craig Comita. I said, and let him know that you're there and why you're there. So I just sort of like, that's
Yeah.
the only thing I could do, you know. Afterwards, I was thinking to myself, who does that young person belong to? Which family? Because it was a Townsville family that she
Yeah.
had
All right.
mentioned. And I said, yep. So that's how not to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is that this, that it's all within an Australian way of doing things. When you look at the bigger picture, I mean, what's wrong in catching a plane and going to a raccoon? If you're talking about it generally, it's oh, okay, well, that sounds good. But then when you get there and you have these sorts of things that are undercurrent things in the community, for example, for respect, um, and just
Story business.
yeah, just doing things the right way and the best procedure for that for everybody.
Oh, yes, that's such a good advice, there, Delphine, because that, yeah, will save you a lot of hustle. That's for sure.
Yes, and I have said it once or twice. I will just ring the OIC because they'll help
Well,
you.
that's yeah. Well, that's another one. Yeah, they will. And
Yeah.
LORE and LAW. Can you explain the difference between LORE and LAW from your perspective?
Yes. Well, LAW is obviously the more structured one. It comes from a different background, as in, I would say, British way of doing things, and whereas LORE is more the best procedures or the best practice for certain language groups, if I can say that. And I can say Bummer people, is like where my mum comes from. They have a certain way of doing things there, and the LORE is important in that they are guidelines and they are certainly um, LAW, even though it's not written down. But if the LORE is not listened to or not practiced deliberately or by mistake, you stand corrected. You stand corrected because there are people around that will correct you about that. Um, a good part of LORE, for example, is in the Torres Strait Island culture that my grandfather is from. When there's a death in the community, and all of these emotions are high, as we know from previous
Yeah.
experience. Emotions are high, and there could be just problems if you don't manage it quickly. Well, from the start, there is this term called Marageth in Torres Strait, and the Marageth is the person that organizes everything, and the Marageth is usually an in-law because the in-law is supposedly disposable, but the family stays intact because they
Yeah.
can take out their frustrations on the Margaret. So you can imagine that the Margaret is walking a thin line and making sure that he or she is doing everything right. Bit like a mediator, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not written down as mediation is, but it's certainly a very important position in I suppose conflict resolution or
Yeah.
preventing that as part of LORE. And that was just the Torres Strait Island example that I
Oh,
could see.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very good advice there, because yeah, the cultures, they have their own little ways of resolving conflicts in terms of how culturally they can do it. So but I think there's a lot of places that's been lost, but there's places like TI is still being practiced, so that's really good. Um, what's happening there, and how can organizations and frontline workers better work in partnership with LORE and LAW coexist? Where
I,
LORE and LAW coexists.
I'm going to use two examples because this is some. I thought of these examples when I saw the questions, and I thought, well, okay, it's possibly like going around to answer them, but it to me it gives a better indication of why it's needed or how come the difference between LORE and LAW. Now, I don't really like to bring up, any of the cases, but there was one particular case where there was a death in the community, and there was a had to be mediation, lengthy mediation about who owned the body. And I didn't realize anything um, of the coroner's practice until I read the report. And what stuck out to me was, okay, this piece of paper um, uh, says that there's a hierarchy of who owns a deceased body. And in this particular case, the
Next of
the
kin.
family went with the eldest child rather than the eldest brother of the deceased.
And that's the cultural protocol.
That's the cultural protocol. That was sorry, it was the LAW that the family chose to go and stand on to not have to follow through with the LORE. So that the people who were strong with the LORE were really upset,
Mm.
right? And so the mediation we had to go back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, as you may have already known. And I thought, well, okay, it was such a traumatic time for
Intense.
nearly everyone.
Yeah.
And it it was the clash of LAW versus LORE, but a deliberate use of LAW to not be culturally responsible to LORE. And why I say that is because the first hire on that list of who owns the body, the first person is the spouse. Now, the spouse being an in-law, as in, right, the spouse, the mother said, well, I'm going to relinquish my position and keep my position, keep the LORE by not having a say, but I'm going to give my son that say. So the son then she stood on the LORE, but then the son stood on the LAW, because when you look at the hierarchy, it's the spouse, then it's a child, you know, then it's a grandchild, then it's grandparent, and the last one is a sibling. And yet we know the LORE says it's the sibling that is the owner of the deceased, and they do all the funeral arrangements. So it
Yeah.
was an eye opener for me. So that's one example. And another example was a little bit more Australian, if you like. And that was, I mean, I'm happy to, not so much happy, but I can disclose it. Um, with my sister's funeral, the eldest, yeah, supposed to be consulted, but my, some of them are not well people, and so I, because I was the point of contact, it was a big, big problem for everybody else, or my siblings. And so they disowned me. They
That's
disowned me,
not
yeah.
good.
They cancelled me. And Um, and I was thinking, well, okay, because when you look at the hierarchy on the coroners list,
Yeah.
we did everything in the first one, the second one, third one, fourth one. So we were the fifth one is eligible, as in the siblings, right? So because I got there first to that, not so much to the house, but to the city, um, it was something that was, wasn't taken very well. Look, I think personally, um, I see that as okay. Well, how do we, as a grieving family or any grieving family, can work in better? I mean, there was no will, there was no what is it? Wills and estates. There was no will, there
Yeah.
was no estate, and so how can we? And I'm looking at an analysis here in a situation like that because I imagine that that would be common to a lot of families. Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we come up with a best practice there, or at least just talk about it and write it down into some kind of a public health paper? Because that's an area that I'm interested in, a public health paper about all of that, and so that people can look back at on it, maybe not so much my family, but other families, and say, well, oh, okay, well, this is what happened. So people are not just alone in this, like you were saying about that before. There are examples around of that kind of reaction to grief, I would say,
Yeah.
and
It's
yeah, and so then
it's very
that.
different.
Yeah, and then that there again is there's LAW and then LORE or whatever we have as in LORE being a stolen generation family. Um, but at the same time, in hindsight, I'm thinking, well, okay, um, it would have been better if X, Y, or Z. So there's shouldas and couldas and wouldas there, but at the same time, it didn't happen that way. Um, and so it needs to be, well, that experience for me, I would like to document that in a
Mm.
way that's, de-identifying, but also hopefully it will help other people as in just another case study of some sort. So, yeah, and I think in that situation, I think the LAW, as in a will, would have been
Yeah.
um, better, better. Yep.
Well, I think that's something that needs to be encouraged. I think you shared. It's very, very. Sometimes it gets very common, I think. And at the time when you're in that situation, you don't know, because you're in the storm, right? You got the grief, you got all things happening at one time, and then you have to decide all these stuff. So it gets a bit complicated and very disjointed. So no, I think that's a really good point you made there about the will, and I think that needs to be encouraged and people to have will. What does respectful corroboration looks like in practice on the ground? We're still talking about LORE and LAW.
Okay. The answer I've got there is an agreed goal. An agreed goal as your if I'm going to engage with that party there is an agreed goal as to why
Yeah,
we're engaging. And we may not um it may not be something big, it could be just something small. It's an agreed goal and a process for the collaboration. I mean, and then respectful communication, that's another part, and
yeah,
consistency. They're just answers off the top of my head.
yeah,
Um, and mind you, like I do work as a music therapist, and so in one-on-one, these are the things that I have to have with the person that I'm helping,
yeah,
because it has to be an agreed relationship in the first place, similar to the mediation, because people don't want mediation, well, you can't hold it. But if they agree, well, there you have an agreement. Consistency, and first of all, the respect to if someone is asking for me to engage in a First Nations community, um, what are the hierarchies there? I have to do homework before I go there. And the homework is finding out the hierarchies. And I think if I can refer to um, the multi dimensions of hierarchies, because there would be the services, for example. Then underneath that would be elders. Then underneath that would be, other people who know or they are talented in certain areas and they have an interest that, um, well, they have lived experiences that they can share with you in the. So you basically setting yourself up with as much information as possible to help you make an informed decision. And then it's not just from there. So the key elements is research, I would say, respectfully looking at what it is that you're there for, agreeing with the people that have asked you,
Mhm.
um, agreeing, okay, as in I'm here to respond to what you've requested me to do, and that respectful communication there and the consistency. I think of straight away, how one time a couple of times you've asked us to talk to the cadets up there, and then
Oh, the new officers.
yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, the
Yeah.
new officers. And then I recall saying something along these lines, um, the respectful communication, uh, without walking away from the framework that sets you up as a professional. And so, you have to answer to whatever it is that makes you a police officer, for example. That's what you've been trained to do. And then, so how do you respectfully communicate to someone without forgetting that you're a police officer? Okay. Um, I'm not saying that there's an answer there, but this is what I've been what I had spoken to the young people about. And while there may not be an answer that is going to fit everybody, this is the beauty of it. The beauty of it is you have your own mind. You're working in the framework. You can use your mind to come up with creative ways to communicate that's respectful of your own position, but respectful of the position of the people or the person that you are engaging with. Um, I know that's very broad, and then of course consistency in that, so that people see, okay, this is their modus operandi. This is how that person is, the consistency often times, to me, from what I can see, falls back on how that person was brought up in their family.
Yeah.
If they were brought up to respect their parents, brother, sister, aunties, uncles, it's a it's easier to be able to fit another framework, and still be able to go out of that as far as um, what is right, and then come back again. And it ends up being something like what I believe you've done, in that you haven't taken off your uniform or your hat and become, you know, uh, as this outrageous person. Um, in actual fact, you were consistently the that professional person, but you also were able to see and be creative in how to engage with people. And there is a really good example that I um I think of straight away. And if you don't mind, I won't say her name, but
Yeah.
you and I were driving back from the council office meeting, and I was driving the little vehicle, and this person was out of sorts, on the main road and just like looking like she's going to be arrested sooner or later because of her behavior. And instead of going straight there and doing that, you asked me to stop the car, you got out and you spoke to her. And you spoke to her in such a way, and I was there, I was listening to everything. And then because of the way that you did that and you used all your, I guess, personal skills too, but not going outside of the framework and de-escalating the situation, we ended up she in the car with us, and we went and bought her some chips and took her home. Now that doesn't cost anybody anything money wise, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you're alluding to there is that it's so important to know the culture because and when you work in a communities, you need to understand the culture and how everything operates, and then people, if they see you respecting that culture, then there's a different level of word like happening. As you probably would remember, call me uncle
Oh, right. Yep. Okay.
culturally because her mother has to call sister,
Mm,
and yeah, so straight away my conversation was there. She called me uncle, not a police officer, and I think that was the de-escalation straight up. And they sort of sent me in a different direction because if I was somebody, just a police officer, just got out of the car and told her to piss off, I think the conversation would be very, very, very different.
mm,
But because of that time, like what you said, when you go to communities, you got to learn the place, understand the protocol. Like you said, when you went there, people sat down with you and told you what relationship name. It's not just saying the relationship name. They're trying to add you into the hierarchy. So that's how you're gonna interact with the community in that way. Still do your job, but at the same time, that's your interaction back and forth.
yep.
So I remember one time because I was given the language to talk because Auntie Harriet and Auntie Martha and them used to always teach me some swear words too, but well, mostly they used to give me all these language words to use when somebody was yelling, and they used to tell me like, "Hey, instead of saying quiet or shut up, everyone," like it will
Yeah.
just inflame people because they're already in a very tense situation, in a big fight or happening anything like that. So say instead of that, say "Popma," and I
That's
did.
right. Yep.
Right. And I'll yell out like "Popma," and next thing you know, everybody stops. They comprehend what I just said because it's an accent that's come out. Probably just a little bit miss way I said it. The first thing, a breakup of laughter. That gave me that opportunity to like, all right, elders from this side take those people that side. Elders from this side take from that side. We'll come and see you guys separately in your areas, and that gives that little break. So that was a great advice I got from all aunties and uncles, and I used it because it was just the biggest thing that de-escalated a lot of stuff. And again, just then people start calling you by the relationship names
Mm,
instead of you become a police officer. You're still doing a job. They remember
yep.
that. And then everybody will call me like, all right, boss, okay, what do you want me to do? This, and this is the community people, right? And then when I come back and have a quiet meeting with them, then I'll have it'll be a different relationship there again with the aunties. They'll
Mm,
be calling me boy, like, hey, yeah, boy,
yeah.
that was good what he did. But when the situation was all, they will call me boss.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a
right.
weirdest, it was a thing that they knew when to shift that, and I knew when that was happening, and they
Mm.
wanted me to lead, and I will be the leader. Or when we're coming and having a cup of tea at the station together, or just having a joke, it was a different relationship. What mistakes do you commonly see that damage trust, and how they can be avoided? That's building trust in relationships.
Well, just listening and rethinking about what you've just the account that you've just shared, um, between the aunties, and then you you kind of sensed when you were their boy, and then you kind of sensed then when you had to take back your officer's role.
Yeah.
Um, you don't get that by just walking into a community and thinking you can do that, because it takes consistency, it takes awareness, it takes, you may not even say anything, but it takes observation, it takes focus, it takes all of those things that tells me or tells you or tells whoever it is that you are there, you are in the moment, and you're paying attention for them.
Mm.
You could, and an example that I can think of, that really annoys people and or else tells them how valued they are, is if you're in a community, sorry, in a, maybe, I don't know, in a meeting, or you're talking to a couple of people, and some are on their phone like this.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't tell the person that they're supposed to be engaged with that they matter.
Yeah.
You know, and and for those people who think that not having their phones there, but just being there and taking, looking like you're paying attention, that'll, and then they're not, that'll come back and bite you too at another stage. So it boils down to, you are sincerely wanting to take part, sincerely wanting to work together, sincerely wanting to communicate, collaborate, because in that situation you're working towards something, and it may not be written down as in step by step, but you're processing it step by step in your mind, but looking at other people's responses too. And if there's anything that I think a lot of our elders are good at, is reading nonverbal communication. I would say that. So I don't know if that answers your question there, but building
No, it
trust,
does.
yeah.
It does. It's a big thing. You got to give your attention. You can't do that in a formal setting where play with your phone. We're talking to someone. It's ultra disrespectful. So it's the same thing in the communities. You have to show respect and give your attention to people when you're talking to them. And I
Mm.
think then it goes. Yeah. I think you've answered that pretty well. Leadership and responsibility. What responsibility do leaders have when working in or alongside First Nations communities?
They have to do that navigation. They have to do the navigation, I believe, over and above their role, because
Yeah.
it doesn't cost anything to do the navigation, to make the mental notes, to write down something for your own learning, for your own informed uh, decision making. And at the end of the day, I guess, you can do the least amount, which is what your job description says for you to do, and no, and it's still quite legal. But what if you wanted to be the best person in that job? What if you wanted to do your personal best? What if you wanted to, because you just loved the position? And I can name a few fly in, fly out members, staff people that I really admire, because it's a hard thing to go in and out and leave your family behind and still deliver because you love the work.
Mm.
And I won't say their names, but one of the gentlemen who passed away recently, I had a lot of respect for him. And there's a lady that still goes back there. I have a lot of respect for her, or two ladies actually that I know, I've spoken to personally. Um, and so, like I say, Aboriginal people, or not just Aboriginal people, but if we're talking in the context of First Nations communities, they will be seeing that. They will be seeing that and they will be taking note of it. And at the end of the day, it adds up to whatever long-term decision, short-term decision that people are making. And I would say that's in doing your personal best as whoever you are, from the way that you grew up and whatever values was instilled in you when you were younger and even now, because I really don't think it stops. We are consistently um, having to grow into situations or having to be creative in situations. And I think I'm answering the question of, closing the gap here, but I'll let
Yep.
you, yeah, I'll let you respond to what I've just said. And so you can lead the questions if you need
No,
to.
no, that's all right. Yeah, no, that's pretty good. Well, what you've said, it's I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. Everything you're saying, and just with organizations, how can organizations embed cultural respect into everyday practice, not just policy?
Um, I think if it's an organization, it's not just one person then, obviously. So that there again, if an organisation is invited to become a stakeholder, let's just say, and then they would, I would say, suggest them that they would go do their homework as to a lot about the community, the people, language group, as much as possible, and have it all down, and then agree to the goal or whatever it is, the purpose that you're interacting with that community for, and come up with the best practice for all the workers of your organization, because at the end
Yep.
of the and then use your hierarchy there to navigate and to proceed. And I would say, if I could use your position, because it seems to be fairly straightforward, like um, you would have taken into account by, I'm hypothetically speaking here, um, assessing a situation maybe with the mayor or myself, if there was a particular issue that came up, there was a bit, so you'd assess that, and then you would say exactly what your organisation's position is, because you already know your role. You already know your role as the head of that organisation, and then what's new is and what's the variable is this incident that's happened, or this
Yeah.
situation that's come up, and that you've had to go in, you read it with other leaders in that situation, and then you pass that information on, and I guess the instructions that go with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a very good way to put it. Just the way everything works, I suppose. In communities or anywhere, it's you got to have a system that works, and mostly the policies and stuff, but also you got to embed cultural stuff, like what we were doing with the with my junior officers. I used to get your auntie and yourself to come and sit down and explain the cultural protocols and stuff in the community. So there's two things happening. The officers used to felt welcome by the community people, and secondly, they were getting to know the community and at the same time learn some very very important rules and pointers, how to operate in that space. So yeah. So again, it's all about understanding. You know your job, but different places have got different complexities around it. How to deal with it? Like,
One of the things that I wanted to mention, and this happened because we were doing that, basically the interagency cooperation. I like to call it that.
Yeah.
And particularly around, the deaths in community, because it's just such a sad time for everyone. And that to me is a good time to let people know you care, right? And
Yeah.
so, what had happened for a few weeks there in a row, we had we made up this, I call it a random act of kindness, but it wasn't necessarily random, because what had happened was, okay, these families have had, let's just say 3 or 4 families have had a death in the family, and then they line up the funerals, because one at a time kind of thing. And so what we did as a justice group, and we worked in with FRC, and then we also worked we invited other agencies to cooperate, well, to contribute, and it was a $200 food parcel, because people would come from other communities, and they would go on to the particular house. They can't
Yeah.
go where other places because of poison relationship until
Mm.
after the death. So there
Yeah.
was all these underlying LORE things happening, and so we thought, well, okay, let's help and show them we care by doing this. And so we lined up. There was about 5 funerals in a row, and we
Yeah.
were going around. It was Cara and I were going around, and even the like Harriet and them, um, and asking different organisations, would you like to contribute? And people were saying, yes, we want to do this.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed that the social, the, the QPS social group, they said, yeah, we want to help. And why I was impressed is because they not only wanted to help, but they still worked within their framework. And their
Yeah.
framework was the allow, where they were allowed to do it, was money that they had raised personally for their social group. So that was really, it just spoke volumes. I can't even
Mm.
describe it even now, but those young people did that, and I can't remember which family they did it for. But when we took to the families, we said, this is from such and such agency. And people were sort of like, you know a little bit surprised, because usually they get all the assistance from WACA around deaths,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that period before the funeral, it was a difficult time, because you had overcrowding, and you had to feed people because that was culturally appropriate, and all of that. So just those little things to help. And I could see that the agencies were really, really glad, and felt like they were contributing in a meaningful way.
Yeah. No, it's a yeah, it's a really good time. It's a sad time, but also a good time for the agencies to come together. And I remember we used to do a lot of that too, to uh, you know, just provide sugar and tea.
Mm,
Because there's a lot of people come to the house to sit down and grieve. So sugar and tea and biscuits, and the community to see that we're there for them,
mm,
not just when we were arresting people. So it's a big thing to then cut that stigma. So it was
mm,
so
mm.
important to build a relationship. Yeah, thank you for on reflection and growth. Um, what advice would you give to someone starting their journey working with First Nations communities?
Um, if they're not on the community straight away, uh, certainly get peer-reviewed articles, or proper articles, or from government websites that say, that advise. And there are several ones that I can think of, is in um, IATSIS. Have you heard of IATSIS in Canberra? Aboriginal and
Uh,
an Australian Institute of
oh, yes, yes.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a document for researchers, people who are wanting to do research and how to follow that properly. I think the Australian Association of Public Health, they have
Yeah.
a component there on how to approach Aboriginal communities or Aboriginal people. Um, so you have that factored into a lot of organisations around. So I would suggest if they home and they've got the, say for instance, you've got an invitation um, to take part at a community or some sort of venture, do that homework. Chances are somebody's already sent that to you, but if they haven't, take the initiative because you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
I think you're adding value to your own outlook when you do that. And it's not a rule. It's not saying you have to. It's saying if you want to, you can do that. And then um, of course the agencies that are there, they are it's very helpful to know what agencies are there and how to approach them just by pure governance, acknowledging pure governance structures and what's the best way to engage or initiate engagement.
Yeah.
I don't know. And sorry. That's the formal structures that are there, but then you also find out from possibly the formal structures on who the elders are there, and then make that connection as well, and then um, be aware that I don't know if this is the right term to use, but roles and responsibilities are gender specific on um, Aboriginal communities. Not necessarily all the time, but you have to make sure that in your own personal research, you you ask if you want to ask discreetly, or you find that out. And so, um, but it ideally, and it with our raccoon, it was beneficial for me because they told me. So if you want to listen to people and invite them to let you know, um, they can easily say certain things like, well, okay, you can be my daughter, and you can call me auntie, or that's your mum, and they place you in that kinship structure there, and
Yeah.
usually that's the nice way of saying, okay, you're here. We acknowledge you're here. You're going to be part of us. You will be enjoying the relationship and everything else that comes with that relationship from your family. And then, and also when you're called upon, you have a responsibility to your family as well. And that could be anything, somebody needs something and you're the one that's able to do it, so can you do it? And it's not
Yeah.
necessarily you're being asked, you're being told. And that's not being bossy, I think that's basically taking your position seriously as one of their family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It happens a lot. Yeah.
I know that you know that because you've just said to me before that you have been adopted, you know.
Mm.
And so that's a very, very, very beneficial part of working within a community. It's more than the welcome to community, that words are being said and spoken, and a ceremony. It's the whole full embrace of
Yeah.
someone into that family or that community or that clan, and it's for life.
Yeah. Yeah. You always it doesn't go away. And it's a mark of respect both ways, and it's very humbling to get that. Like, I'll be going on walking on Kent's Esplanade, and then I'll have somebody from Arakun or Dumaji or Hoval or any of these communities, Kawanyama, stop in, and they'll say hello, and great conversation, and somebody will call me uncle. It's like, because he's the brother of a kid of that,
Mm.
the person was supposed to be my brother, and through the family connection. So it makes sense, and at the same time they respect it. It's not just a word given; it's actually they mean it. That's then you become the part of centering in Dumaji, like um, you still got the respect there, like in Northern Territory and all everywhere. So you get all different. In Northern Territory, I've got a different skin name. It's a different, So I go there, and they given me a different skin name there, and to connect to me to that tribe. So
Mm.
it's a very humbling thing, and at the same time, it helps you. I believe it helped me in my work.
Yes.
Able to get my work done better, and make it much more easier for me to operate in those kind of places. Because end of the day, the more you embrace those things, culture and understanding of culture, and seeing how everything operates, and you sort of work it together, then allows you to understand LORE, and then you can incorporate LORE um, to work better. Because end of the day, LORE, LAW working together, like what we were doing in Arakun with their mediation, and working with different things, like the mobile phones, when everybody was texting and making trouble, and through LORE, you said, all right, this is something that the elders can bring those phones, and we can keep it for safekeeping, and that stops that drama there. So empowering the elders to start, working with their rank structure to still work with LAW to restore order. And that was, that thing, that Operation Arcmin we were doing.
Mhm.
That's a great example of how all that operates together. So, no, thank you for sharing that. And just for the listeners to see how important those things are. They're not just titles; they actually in communities they mean something. That leads me to the next question: what does cultural humility mean to you, and how can people practice it daily?
Um, I can only use my own experience, um, because I believe it'll be different to different in different places.
Yeah,
I'd like to use the Alice Springs example, because what had happened to me there, I just finished being, graduating as a nurse,
yeah,
and there was a woman there that had blood coming out of her head. She'd obviously been, some domestic violence situation. And so here I was going over to try and help her. And I was just being told, really, like, sit down, sit down, sit down, but none of the words, just people just looking at me and going like that. And I didn't really understand it, but I did. I sat down, and that there was a humility for me, not humiliation, but a humility, because I did not know the culture. I had no right to be assuming but what I learnt was applicable there in that moment. And so I was grateful, and I still am, to those people, even though, they probably were annoyed with me. I was grateful that I learnt that day within that context, within that time frame,
yeah,
because it had to be instant. And
yeah,
so that's the cultural humility that I learned from there. And in terms of my recent with experience with Arakun, The cultural humility that I believe um, I exercised there or was encouraged. I was encouraged to exercise. You call me uncle. You know, in a modern world, since when does I mean, I'm not this kind of person, but since when in a modern world does an unknown male or just met him that day tells you to call him uncle? Tells a
Yeah.
woman from another place to call him uncle. And when I say woman, I mean I'm a grandmother, and so um, but it didn't bother me because I needed to know who I was there. I needed to know what they wanted me to be there, what position. I needed to know that, um, and you got to be humble to learn from people around you on where it is that you have to stand, because you're not in charge there. You're not from there, um, and so that willingness to learn, I think, is a humility that you just have to have
Yeah.
in any situation like that. And even if it was an emergency, like the more or less like the Charles Creek thing, that was kind of like an emergency. Um, and but it was all within LORE, because if it was a crime, I would have been arrested. you know, I believe,
Yeah.
that's hypothetically, and that's just uh, me joining those dots. But there is a humility that says that you can have, and that you could probably do yourself a favor and try and develop that by thinking, well, okay, doesn't matter what university degree I come here with, doesn't matter what seniority I have in another place. I am just here in somebody else's place, and I need to know what it is that that will make them happy and enhance my work.
Yeah. Having that cultural understanding, that's yeah, it's so important in this when you were operating in anywhere. So kudos to you to learning those lessons. What does strong strive to reach optimal new goals mean to you in the context of culture, community, and partnership?
Well, this is what I think answers the question for me anyway about
Yeah.
closing the gap, right?
Yeah.
Why is there a gap? The easiest explanation I can give, and I said this to one of the agents up in Arakoon, I just said, well, and as in that person's department that she works for, your shoe does not fit the Arakoon people's foot, you know, so there's a gap. That agency does not meet the needs in total of the Arakan people. So there, strive to reach optimal new goals. Yes, strive within your framework, because if you are a registered music therapist like I am, and I'm going there to help someone, I need to operate by the code of ethics, right? I can't go out of that. Same with you, same with other people in their roles, and they've learned, and they are qualified for. So to strive to reach optimal new goals there, it means what's new is you're collaborating with different group of people now. And it's different to Dumaji. You might have the same agencies over in Dumaji, but you've got different personalities there, different personalities here. And so it's fresh and it's organic. This is what I have written down here. The context of culture, community, and partnership in each of those places, and possibly even different days in the same community, it has to be fresh. It has
Yeah.
to be your eyes open. It has to be you taking in and seeing responses. And if, say, for instance, there's someone that you've been meeting with regularly for whatever purpose, because that was an agreed arrangement in the first place, and you find that they are sad or they're angry about something, I would do, um, I think it would you would do your own self a favor by finding out a little bit more. Not so much being a busybody, but even to pause a little bit, or I don't know, try to sort of flesh out a little bit of whatever is going on there, just so that everybody is okay to go to the next step. And that takes time. That takes time. That takes observation, intuition. It takes, to me, that's the difference between just doing your job and forcing it because you can, because you know that's your position and you know, um, or you work with that group. And I think the collaboration with people on the ground outside of their role as that officer in that agent department, and I don't know, other great groups there. When you when you're working together, pardon me, without compromising your own policies and laws and regulations, and that means you are going a little, you are asserting yourself a little bit more in ways that are enhancing rather than going against the law of your code. And this calls for creativity, and this is what I was talking to to the young officers about. I look around here, and we were Harriet and I were thinking, well, okay, young people are creative, you know, creative. Use your imagination, use your creation. Stay within the challenges. Obviously, stay within your own framework, but there's there's no law against being kind to someone. There's no
Yeah.
law about, so use those parts of what you think you have to put forward and make it meaningful. And this is what I'm saying, fresh, organic, because if you're used to having the same meal with people because that's what was set up in the first place, you want to make sure it's fresh every day. You're not going to use, stale ingredients with the same meal. It's the same, to me, it's the same human touch, if you like.
Mm.
And that's one on one. If you're one on one, and that's, I'm talking from a therapist point of view here, one on one or in a small group or for a community. So striving to reach optimal new goals. You grow with people, you move with them. Um, that's the best I think you can do, and it's exciting when you look at what can happen in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so true there. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel safe. Like in policing terms, everybody wants to feel safe in every community. So um, you know, the you go there, do you what are you supposed to do? Like if you have to arrest somebody, you have to arrest someone. Like community doesn't mind that. Like in terms of my experience has been that people want to feel safe and there's no compromise there. But sometimes we just gotta obviously have a bit more understanding of the community and how we go about a couple of things. But apart from that, like I think everybody is in the same page in terms of what you're saying. It's like it's about having that common ground, meet up, understand, and deliver, and stay in your framework, uh,
Mm.
which you're saying. So yeah, that makes sense. What message would you like listeners to take away about working respectfully with First Nations people and communities?
Well, the overall message there is it can be the journey of your life. It can be. And you can have wonderful memories if because working in First Nation community there, if we're using that acronym there, like STRONG, for example, striving to reach optimal new goals. What person doesn't want to strive in their role as teacher or something like that? Um, So when you strive to reach optimal new goals, that could be when you're just working on yourself, but when you start working with Aboriginal, another group of people that need what you have, right? Um, that's where you can make it your own. You can make it your own by being the creative person in that community in ways that are culturally safe, culturally appropriate, all of those kinds of things. And I would imagine using that there, strive to reach optimal new goals. That would be a really good motto to follow. Obviously, doing your homework first, just all the logistics about um, what's there, what agencies are there, how you could fit in, because if you're with a particular agent or agency or a department. So doing your homework in that way, mind you, that's extra to your role. But there again, that depends on how much of an impact you want to make as your own professional person, and in that community. And I guarantee, I mean, look at us, 2 years after for me, still talking about the impact of that wonderful opportunity of being able to collaborate within other agencies, and you make lifetime friends out of that.
Mm,
Who wouldn't want that?
yeah,
But then you could just go and do your job and come home, and that's okay too, because no one's forcing you to go, to do more.
yeah. No, no, it's a very good advice. Yeah, the connections and the networking you get out of working in collaboration, it's life changing, and also last long all your life, because these connections are very important. Like, you just never know who and when you're gonna need that connection, or support from that person that you build that relationship in that community or place. So, no, thank you for that good advice. And I just want to say thank you for coming on Strong Legacy Podcast and sharing your journey and your insights and your opinion. So hopefully, it helps somebody if they're struggling with it. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I was very, very pleased that you invited me, Amit, because this is a classic example of people worked together and had a long, an augmented professional relationship outside of those roles. And so that's a good thing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And what do we say? Do we say apo?